Well, good afternoon. I'm Alan Matheson, the Executive Director of the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority. That's the entity that was created by the legislature to oversee the redevelopment of the 600 acres of state land near Point of the Mountain. We welcome you today. We're so grateful that you would spend time and have enough interest to be part of making this opportunity as great as it can possibly be. Let me kind of launch in. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go into a little presentation to begin with. I want to emphasize to everybody, number one, that what we're doing today is going to be quite similar to what we did in the last open house. This is our third open house. It's an opportunity for us to gather input and to provide really raw material for our planning efforts. But we want to make sure that we can accommodate as many people as possible. So we've tried to do this at different times of the day. And if you've participated in one of the past open houses, especially the last one, you'll see that this one is quite similar in terms of the information we're providing. I wanted to let everybody know as well that we are recording this session. It's also being live streamed on our YouTube, our Facebook, and Twitter accounts. And we'll have this available so people can go to our website and have an opportunity to review it if you weren't able to participate today. Let me just review where we're going to go today. I want to first start with an overview. And this is going to be basic for some who may have heard it before, but some may not be familiar with the point and what we're trying to accomplish, who's involved, and where we are in the process. So I'm going to share some of that information to start with. We'll then get a little presentation on where we are in terms of our master planning, some of the key concepts that are underlying that work. And the most important thing is not just to give you information, but also to get information. And so we're anxious to be able to have an opportunity in a manageable setting to hear your questions and ideas. So we will be breaking out into breakout rooms a little bit later, an opportunity for you to meet with subject matter experts to get your questions answered and to provide your thoughts on how we can improve the planning. And then we'll come back together as a group, share the lessons learned from each of those breakout sessions, and kind of discuss what some of the next steps are. To begin with, if you haven't heard much about the point, I want to share with you a quick video that I think provides a nice overview.
Most people in the state know that the existing correctional facility at the point of the mountain is going to be moved, which means that this land is going to be available for development. That area will be known as the point.
The new prison is expected to be completed in mid-2022. At that point, we'll start looking at demolition of the site and site preparation for development.
There's really not much like this anywhere in the world where you have 700 acres located in a densely populated area in the heart of Silicon Slopes. This is unlike anything we've seen in the history of the state of Utah and a rare opportunity in the United States or anywhere in the world.
We have one of the most vibrant technology scenes in the country, maybe even the world. The epicenter of Utah's Silicon Slopes is really at that prison site. And so we'll have the opportunity to have this blank slate that can be programmed to help accelerate additional growth, additional opportunity, so that we can see a major campus form there, a campus that's environmentally sustainable, that is focused and centered around research and innovation, that is a job center, that allows people who live and work in the site to access the beautiful outdoors that we have here in the state of Utah.
We want it to be open to the public so they can see what we're doing and have input into the process. Tell us what works, what doesn't, how we can improve it.
The dream is that this will be something that is unique and something that every Utah can be proud of.
We would rather be right than fast on this project. The citizens are part of this decision-making process. It's not just the governor or the legislature. It really is everyone working together to make this the best project it can possibly be, to show the world that that entrepreneurial spirit, the Utah people coming together still exists, and it's something we're very proud of and can't wait to complete.
This really is a great opportunity, as was described in that video. Something that you don't see very often. In fact, there are not many places around the country or even around the world where we have this kind of opportunity. 600 acres of undeveloped land between two very populous and fast-growing metropolitan areas, well served by transportation, a future transit system that will go through this site, really in the heart of an innovation center. Now, Utah is a great place to live, and it tops the list of a number of magazines and groups in terms of quality of life, economic opportunity, et cetera. And we want to continue that. We know that we've got significant challenges with growth. We think that this can be a model site that helps us address those challenges in a thoughtful, forward-looking way and makes life better in Utah. This can be a place where we have innovation that helps solve problems, economic opportunity, so that our kids and grandkids can have the option of living here and having a world-class career. A place that demonstrates sustainability practices, open space, and parks and recreation, and much more. I think most are familiar with this site. It's at the point of the mountain area off of I-15 and Bangerter Highway. We're not starting from scratch, though. There's been an awful lot of input from the public over a number of years, and the legislature outlined a number of objectives for us to accomplish at this site. So we're not starting with a blank sheet. We're starting with some goals like workforce development, job creation, improving quality of life in the area, having a balance of housing and jobs, making sure that we've got a world-class transportation system here, improving air quality, reducing resource use, coordinating with surrounding communities. And interestingly, they directed us to pursue a nationally recognized research center at this site. I mentioned that we're not starting from scratch. We've been operating for some time here. And there are a number of groups that have worked on the decision to move the prison. A predecessor group called the Point of the Mountain Development Commission oversaw an extensive public process to look at how the broader Point of the Mountain region could develop and grow in ways that improve our quality of life. The Point of the Mountain State Land Authority has been around since 2018. And we've been laying the groundwork for this planning process, which is going on now, with the hope that we can start implementing once the inmates are moved to the new facility in about mid-2022. As with anything, the people are critical to success, and I think that means all of us. But I want to let you know that the board that oversees this work consists of 11 members of the community selected by state leadership. They represent a number of parts of the state and different backgrounds. The co-chairs are Lieutenant Governor Deidre Henderson and Representative Lowry Snow from Washington County. And it's interesting. I think that sends a message that this is a statewide project. And so they want leadership from all parts of the state to help as we put this together. We've got 4 legislators, 2 mayors, the heads of 2 state agencies, private business represented on the board, as well as the Commissioner of Higher Education. We think education is a big piece of this project. The board has adopted some guiding principles that really are just what they say. They guide the decisions that are made. And the first is promote the public interest. we recognize that this is land that's owned by all residents of the state. And the board recognizes its obligation to ensure that we are advancing the interests of the people of the state. Secondly, it set the standard. This is, as I said, a remarkable opportunity, and we don't expect that it'll be just another development. We think that it has to set the standard for sustainability and for thoughtful growth that can help us preserve the things we value as we grow. Third is think regionally. So we're not just looking within the boundaries of this site. It has to fit well within the broader region. We're coordinating with surrounding communities, with surrounding planning and transportation agencies, all with the goal of making sure that this is additive to regional quality of life. Next is to take the long view. I think you heard the governor say in that video that it's more important that we do this right than that we do it fast. So we want to make sure that we are being thoughtful and making decisions that will benefit generations to come and not just today. We can be a little more patient than the private sector. Be open and transparent. This is something, again, because this is a public project, the public needs to know what's going on. So we record all of our meetings, put them on our website. We live stream our meetings so that anybody can watch. There are opportunities for comment, and that will continue. And then finally, act with integrity. We take really seriously this public trust that we've been given and refuse to act with anything but the highest ethics. So I'm going to step back a few years to that predecessor entity that I talked about, the Point of the Mountain Development Commission, that involved well over 4,000 people in developing a vision for the broader Point of the Mountain area. They analyzed that vision relative to baseline development. In other words, what would it look like relative to what it might if we just keep doing what we're doing? And found that would generate 150,000 more high-paying jobs, that would generate over $9 billion of public revenues that can go to infrastructure and education, social services. That if we develop consistently with that vision, we can produce fewer air emissions, that we can spend less time on the road, drive fewer miles. Of course, as I've said several times, public input is important. And in that early visioning stage, over 4,000 people participated really meaningfully in a lot of advisory groups and working sessions. In our process, we've created 5 working groups of Utah experts in these various categories. They've worked really hard to dive into the details and make sure that broad interests can be reflected in the planning that's done. The working groups developed a report with a number of ideas and concepts that they thought ought to be incorporated into this plan. But among the most important things they did was identify 6 key vision elements. These are the broad policies and goals that underlie everything we do. We want to make sure that this site is a great community. It's welcoming to all, that accommodates people of different incomes, people of different ages and backgrounds. That's a place that's vibrant and a lot of different uses, that's fun, where people can gather and enjoy time. It's got to be served by transit, ways that we can minimize automobile use, improving air quality and convenience, and saving money for the people that live in the area. Economic growth, creating great jobs, bringing opportunity into the community. Innovation, where we're going to be bringing some of the best minds together with resources to help solve problems, not just in Utah, but throughout the world. Sustainability, ways that we can use our very limited water resources better, manage stormwater on site, reduce emissions and improve air quality, use less energy, and all of those kinds of things. We're trying to have standards that are much higher than we've typically seen in our community. And finally, collaboration. Again, this is kind of a group project. Ultimately, the board's making decisions, but with a lot of input and making sure that we try to maximize the good for people in our communities. We're now in the planning stage, and we've involved actually well over 3,000 people to this point through surveys, presentations, media outreach, social media, and much, much more. All of that has kind of fed into our plan. This plan is going to be a framework plan, meaning that it's going to give clear direction to where we're going, but be flexible enough to accommodate changes in the market, changes in the community, and make sure that it can continue to be relevant. To do this plan, we looked far and wide, and we had some of the most outstanding planning firms in the world apply to be part of this. After an open, transparent, and very competitive process, last year we engaged the firm SOM, or Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. It's a firm well known for its competency and some of the cutting edge projects that it's developed in terms of sustainability and function. It's a multidisciplinary firm that has background and expertise in everything from engineering to architecture to interior design to this master planning that we're doing. And you'll be hearing from them very shortly. So here's where we are in terms of outreach. We've got a survey that is underway now. We encourage anybody to participate in it. You can access it at this link you can see on site. You can also find the link on our website. And quick survey, but it allows us to dive into more detail in some of the elements that you'd like to see at the site and how those ought to, what form they ought to take. We're now in that third stage kind of where we've gathered extensive information, created a number of ideas for the site, evaluated alternatives to see which perform best for transportation, for air quality, for economic, for quality of life measures, et cetera. And we're now starting to narrow in and focus more on a draft plan, one that we can start refining and fine-tuning so that it works better and meets the needs of our community. Again, with the goal of having that framework plan finished this summer. Number of ways you can contact us. We've heard from a number of people through website, www.thepointutah.org. We send out newsletters regularly and try to provide a number of opportunities for you and others to weigh in. So we hope you don't hesitate. So I'm going to wrap up that piece, and that's kind of our overview in terms of where we've been, who we are, what we're trying to accomplish. I'm now going to turn it to Pete Kindle from SOM, who's been overseeing much of the framework master planning process. We'll let him kind of run through that project.
Thank you, Alan. It's great to be with everyone again. I'm going to go to full screen mode. And we're pleased to provide this update on the draft framework plan. As Alan mentioned, we are in stage 3 of a 4-stage process. So it's a great opportunity to get your feedback today. I'll cover these 4 elements here in the next 30 minutes. And then we will be breaking into focus groups where we can look at and talk about any details of the material that you'd like to address. As Alan mentioned, we are really in the process of creating a framework plan that delivers the vision that has been developing for the last year or two. So we greatly value all of the inputs that have come in. We are adhering and advancing these 12 goals that were developed by Envision Utah in the previous phases of the project. What is a framework plan? A framework plan is simply a physical plan that articulates and tests the vision elements on the site. So it's really a site plan that lets us measure and draw the different land uses, road structures, and other elements of the plan that are part of the vision. The purpose of this is to really make sure everything works and to understand the relationships between the different framework plan components. So that's the purpose of a framework plan, and that will form the basis for the development of the site moving forward. As some of you may remember, we did go through our stage 2 plans in previous meetings. We had developed 3 options or 3 concepts: complete community, regional hub, and economic catalyst. And at the conclusion of stage 2, we did combine the best elements of all of these plans, in addition to your feedback, to advance to stage 3. So the plans you'll see today really are a aggregation or combination of all of the best elements plus the public feedback that you have given us. And the public feedback has been incredibly helpful in terms of informing the plan and providing inspiration for the planning team. So we want to thank you for that. We would like to reflect back some of that feedback here today. It came in these 6 categories that you see listed here: transportation, site diversity, sustainability, job creation, schools, and parks and open space. So just a little overview of some of the major points that we heard around transportation. This idea of regional connectivity is very important, and we understand that. We are creating a framework plan that is regionally connected so that this site is no longer isolated as it has been because of its use as a prison. We also want to emphasize a variety of transportation modes. So we want to move away in this plan from simply a car-based environment to create a multimodal plan. That's been a fundamental goal of the project, and then incorporate transit that is being advanced in this area, including bus rapid transit and connections to the front runner stations. In terms of the site diversity, this is also an exceptionally important goal of the project. Housing will be a significant part of this project, so we are incorporating and planning for a variety of housing types and price points. So that is a critical part of our live-work idea, this mixed-use vision that people should be close to where they work. And this housing will be offered to a variety of employees, residents who want to live here, at all different sort of price points and levels of housing refinement. In terms of population, we are estimating there'll be approximately 15,000 people on the site who live here, and also another potentially 25,000 to 30,000 that work here. So we're talking about a fairly significant on-site population, somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50,000 people. So we want to make sure that the plan really reflects the diversity of both the people that will live here as well as the people that will work here, and that the land uses that we're proposing accommodate that diversity. As Alan mentioned, we also are focused heavily on sustainability. We want the project to be a sustainable model for Utah. You have offered and challenged us to really raise the bar on sustainability. So we're looking at water, how to be very conservative with water use on the site, and how the buildings can also conserve water. Job creation was another point of public feedback. We understand that there is a goal and a desire for significant economic vitality here. And in the land use mix, we are planning for that vitality. So there'll be a range of jobs. It won't be exclusive to one industry or one level of education, but there'll actually be a variety of jobs available to all Utahns. We do anticipate a substantial educational component to the project. This might include a grade school, potentially all the way up to a high school. But also more importantly, it'll include job training opportunities and opportunities for adult education and retraining so that we can bring all ages and all educational levels into the job creation and educational environment of the point. Your comments also included goals and requests for parks, trails, and open space, and the plans, as they have been updated, have incorporated your requests. We understand and agree that these elements contribute significantly to the quality of life of the project. And I think when you see the components that are being proposed here, that will be very exciting, and I think meet the needs of not only this community, but adjacent communities. So that's a summary of the public commentary received so far, and we're very pleased to report back that many of these elements, if not all of them, have been at least addressed, if not outright incorporated into these revised plans. I wanted to next just touch on some signature design elements. Even though we have 3 options in stage 3, these 21 elements are shared between all 3 design concepts. So I'll walk through these very quickly, but first and foremost, we want the plan to be uniquely Utah, and it should reflect both the vibrancy of Utah's urban environments, but also your incredible ecosystems. So we want this plan to accommodate and reflect both of these attributes. We also see the point as an economic catalyst for the entire Wasatch Front. That's its primary mission. That's the mandate given to the team by the state legislature. So that is really one of our core goals. We also want the plan to be connected to history. We want it to be specific to this place in the world, to Salt Lake and the Salt Lake Valley and the history of this area. So we have looked into some of the historic planning measures that informed the original Salt Lake plan, as you can see here on the left, and that has directly informed our plan, which is shown on the right. So the same structure carries through and creates this cultural connection between Salt Lake's history and where we're going with this modern plan. In terms of the sustainability approach, water is a key element, and we're committed to really creating a plan that is the most sophisticated in Utah in terms of its water use. So here you see the site topography. We're going to capture this on-site water flow. We also want to provide a regional connection from a recreational standpoint. So one of the key elements in the plan is this river to range trail. And we see this as an important regional asset joining the Jordan River to the Wasatch Range. We also are planning for this to be a complete community. So it'll be not only office and employment, but also residential, connected to a mixed-use core. Other components include what we call a 15-minute city. So this entire project will be walkable from the center within about a 15-minute walk. So this re-emphasis on pedestrian movement rather than automobile movement is quite important. And then that larger 15-minute city will be broken into smaller 5-minute district. So within each district, you'll have access to shops and different conveniences, whether it's close to your work or close to your residence. Of course, one of the major drivers of the project is the idea of a business technology focus. So we want this to really be a significant part of the plan, and it has been incorporated in the eastern half of the project. An institutional and research element, also quite important in terms of the planning. And we also want it to be a model live work community. As I mentioned, housing is a critical part of this. Workforce housing will be a necessity to make the project work. So we are planning on a significant residential component. And some of that may even be incorporated into the office and mixed use parts of the project. We do want to include what we're calling innovation accelerators. So given the innovation goal of the project, having specific places in the plan where new companies can come in, try out new technologies, and bring those to market are quite important. In keeping with the multimodal idea, BRT is a significant part of the transportation plan. It is passing right through the center of our site. So we want to make sure that that is aligned with the greatest areas of density and job creation so that people can take the BRT to work from any point in the valley. We will have a mobility circulator. You can see the one potential route in the small drawing on the lower left. We want to bring innovative transportation ideas to the project. There will also be a significant retail and entertainment destination, as well as on the western end of the site, a new wetland and community park. We're still discussing the precise size of that. And complementing that will be a new central park. We think it's important to have a central open space that really acts as the gathering place for the point. And then a last few ideas that every design option includes are these pedestrian priority zones. These are areas where car travel will be limited, and the priority will be given to pedestrian movement and walkability between the different development areas. We also envision a complete network of pedestrian links that will connect all of the districts together. So you'll be able to move from one side of the project to the other, from your house to where you work, without necessarily having to walk on a street. You may be able to walk down a parkway or some other type of pedestrian corridor. And then smaller parks scattered throughout the project that will really serve everyone. So whether you're a worker or whether you live here or whether you're just visiting, this series of smaller parks will be present in every district. And then finally, we want the innovation to extend all the way to the physical design of the major pieces of the project. So we envision streets and mobility, demonstrating this idea of innovation. We want the open spaces to also be progressive and 21st century in terms of how they're designed and used. Of course, the buildings will be reflective of Utah's materials and climate, but also innovating in how we conceive of those buildings. And then finally, the smart city strategies and sustainability concepts that will tie everything together are an incredibly important part of this idea of an integrated urban environment. So next, I'd like to quickly go through the current framework plan alternative. So as I mentioned, we did in stage 2 identify a preferred direction. We have then prepared 3 variations of that preferred direction. So these are these alternates that you see here. So they look quite similar, and they actually are, because they all have those shared elements that I just talked about. But there's a few little nuances and variations that I think will be important to discuss. So the first one is has what we call 60% developable area. That means 60% of the site will be used for development. And that is shown in the gray zones. So the gray areas represent areas of development. The green represents open space, and the white are the roadway networks. The red line is the BRT route. You can see the BRT has two stations, one to the north, which is indicated by that white dot, and one to the south, which is indicated by that second white dot. You can see that the open space network is focused on what we call the River to Range Trail. I mentioned that earlier. That connects from the Wasatch foothills down to the Jordan River. That will have a pathway in it, a bike route that goes over I-15 and then goes over Bangor and gets everybody into the Jordan River Trail system. So we think that's really a signature element. It will also be designed as a natural drainage way, which will help with our water management and our water conservation ideas. As you can see here, the plan is structured around a grid of streets that is based on that Salt Lake grid that I mentioned earlier. And the programming or land uses that will be assigned to each of these development areas is indicated here. The blue color generally represents office or office-related land uses. The yellow and brown colors generally represent residential or residentially related land uses. So in this option, we have office to the east. We have generally residential to the west, and you can see the red in the middle indicates our retail and entertainment zone. This is more of a mixed use zone that would act as a unifying element for the whole plan. We have indicated an institutional district or institutional group of buildings or users down in the south end, and we envision the north end as being more of a innovation and research and development zone. We have organized the plan into clear districts as indicated here by the colors. And the purpose of this is to really give the plans a little more structure and identity. So each district would have a certain purpose or focus. So on the right, we have an office district. On the left, we have primarily residential districts. And the red in the middle is the mixed use, what we call the hub. We are indicating retail development in specific areas. We don't want to spread out the retail too much, but we also want it to be available to people in their day-to-day life. So whether they're working or living. So these smaller circles represent a 4 or 5 minute walking distance. So you can see that we are proposing a series of entertainment and retail districts that would serve both residents and workers. In terms of density, we are proposing higher density towards the middle where the BRT is. And as you move away from the BRT, the density gets lower. Generally, we're saying that the highest densities in the project would be what we call an FAR of 2.0, which is about a 6 to 8 story building. And as you move away from that BRT route, those building heights are going to drop to, say, 2 to 4 stories. So it won't be a high-rise area, but the core areas will still be fairly dense. This is the open space plan for alternative 1. So again, you can see that river to range trail right in the middle, really acting as the primary open space. And in this option, the Central Park is located just to the north of that river to range trail. But you can also see that every district has a neighborhood park or a district park. So similar to being accessible to retail, all residents and workers will be accessible to a small park as well. A few last drawings on alternative one. This is the road network, and you can see in pink in the middle, that's that pedestrian priority area. So this will be an area that where car travel is limited, and pedestrians will have the priority. And that might look something like this. Why would we do something like this? The idea is that it allows free movement between, say, the retail, which is shown in red, and residential and office areas that are close by. So you get a much more accessible district, but also a slightly safer district. So you can move between work and home and retail areas without having to cross major roads. The micromobility and transit diagram for this option looks something like this. And this is the pink line represents BRT, the yellow line represents potentially a circulator of some sort. And a circulator would simply be a smaller vehicle that allows people to get to the center of the project without having to drive. And then schools and institutions are shown here. So we are thinking of a school site that's adjacent to that major park system, off of the major roads, but yet close enough to provide convenient access. And then some sort of institutional presence or district here to the south. And here you see a three-dimensional model of option one. And you can get a sense here of the building heights. So again, it will be a relatively low rise project. It won't be excessively tall relative to what's also in the neighborhood in Draper. But again, some of the central buildings along BRT would be in the 8 to 10 and potentially even up to 12 stories. Alternative 2 and 3, as I said, are quite similar in many ways, so I won't spend as much time on those. I'll go a little bit quicker and just point out some of the major differences. So in alternative 2, we're developing about 55% of the land area. So this is the one with the highest percentage of open space. And the reason for that is we have added what we're calling the Jordan River Community Park, which is up in the northwest side of the plan here. And that is to meet a goal or a comment that the project should provide some recreational amenities to this community and surrounding communities. We can still meet the development goals with this park included, but it means that we'll have to build a little more densely on certain parcels to get that same development outcome. The other difference in this design is that the central park, which you see here in the middle of the drawing, actually is connected to the river to range park. So it's a little further south. So we'd love to hear some feedback today from anyone on that idea. The land use plan is quite similar. Office generally to the east, residential is generally to the west, but in this drawing you can see there's more residential in the middle portion of the plan. So we want to have less division between work and housing. So in this plan, we have brought some housing further east and we've allowed some office to go further west. So it's a little more of a mixed plan in option 2. The road network is quite similar. Again, a pedestrian priority zone that is in the middle of the project. Again, that would be an area where cars are limited. This one has a different idea about mobility in terms of a autonomous or electric circulator shown in the yellow. The idea here is that you actually have a number of smaller loops that would connect back to the BRT. So option 2 is shown here in a 3-dimensional view. Again, the building heights are similar. In this option, we have a slightly more dense core. It's not really visible in this particular drawing, but the buildings are a little bit taller in that central part of the project. You can see BRT in this dotted line coming through the project, the river to range trail, which would connect from the upper left through the middle of the project and across I-15 to the lower right. So again, similar structure. And then alternate 3 or concept 3 is in the middle in terms of the development area. This would have 57.5% development area. So again, it's between the other two. You still have a community park, but it's a little bit smaller. The other major difference in this option is we've brought the BRT line right through the middle of the core area. So that's something we'd also like some feedback on today from the general public, is your thoughts on the BRT pathway. The Central Park is separated from the River to Range Park. It's a little bit north, but not quite as far north as in option 1. The land use plan, again, is similar, a mixed use zone in the middle of the project, office to the east and residential to the west, institutional to the south. This is the retail plan and more of the mixed use block diagram. So you can see the orange is more of a mixed use idea for certain parcels, and the red indicates where actual retail would occur. The road network is quite similar, another pedestrian priority zone here in the middle for option 3. And this one also has a series of loops shown in the yellow line that would be the autonomous shuttle or the circulator. So the purpose of the circulator, again, is to connect all of the districts back to BRT, but also connect residential zones to office zones. And then here is the 3-dimensional view for option 3, looking from the southeast. So I-15 is in the foreground, the Jordan River is in the upper left. You can see that river to range trail through the middle, and then again the BRT route shown in the dotted red line would pass right through the middle of the project, adjacent to the Central Park. So that's really the primary differentiator in this option. So as you can see, the design options are getting closer together, which is appropriate for where we are in the framework plan process. We think we have good consensus around some of the major elements. I just wanted to end quickly with a little bit on the park design. The park planning really is divided into 4 or so categories. We have, of course, the river to range park, which is shown in the lightest green color here. We have the Central Park, which is shown in the bluish color. And we then have a series of smaller parks and connecting green elements that link everything together. We are also proposing a buffer zone around the perimeter of the project that would not only screen noise from I-15 and other roadways, but also visually act as a screen. But more importantly, it would actually be a linear park that you could jog in or take walks in, go for hikes, ride your bike. So it creates a network of open space throughout the whole project that allows for a lot of different varieties. So here in this drawing, you can see in the orange lines, the trail network. So you can see very comprehensive. The lighter green colors are what we call the program areas. So these are specific fields or activities where there might be a sports field or something like that. So you can see that the open space idea is very comprehensive. It touches all parts of the project, but yet also provides specific activities for the plan. We think the River to Range Park really is one of the most exciting aspects of the project. Here you see some initial thinking about how it could be designed. It's about 1.5 miles long, and it's about 500 feet wide on average, so it's a significant open space. But it would be broken into 4 distinct zones or character areas. So at the bottom we have what we call the delta. Here's a cross section of a typical segment of the River to Range. So as I mentioned, at its narrowest, it's about 300 feet wide. At its widest, it's 500 to 600 feet wide. So at the bottom, what we call the delta, this is where the wetland area would be. This is where the water would be managed from a stormwater perspective, but also would include a lot of uses and activities down here, most of which are oriented more towards really the enjoyment of nature. And again, bringing that Utah ecology forward in the plan. Here's an image of daybreak, but we're imagining something similar. In the middle, what we call the reach, this is through the middle of the residential zone. So you see maybe some more play areas, you see lawn areas. And we would also anticipate that this would be again, a Utah-based ecological idea. Would not have water in it all the time, because that's not typical of this part of the Utah range, the Wasatch Range. But it would, during springtime or high rainfall events, accommodate some stormwater. What we call a central gateway is in the middle of the project, adjacent to the Central Park area. This might be a little more active, maybe have game areas or performance areas, which you can see in the reds and orange colors. But again, primarily a nature-based environment. And great access and accessibility through some trail systems. And then the upper end, close to I-15, may be the most active part of the River to Range. So we might have more outdoor activities, maybe a climbing wall, things like that, tennis courts. You can see some of that in this drawing. So the River to Range Park will actually be programmed quite appropriately for where it sits in the master plan. So it won't be a uniform response, but actually a varied response. So I think I'll stop there. Again, I just wanted to reiterate that the 3 alternatives are really concepts right now. We are still in the process of refinement, so we look forward to your comments. And even though they do look similar in terms of the large ideas, there are some differences and nuances to each option, which I think in the working groups we'll be happy to explain in more detail if that's necessary. So Ellen, I think that'll cover the update.
That's great. Thank you very much, Pete. We appreciate that. And thanks to all of you for your patience as we've gone through it. We know it's a lot of material to digest quickly, but also recognize that our conversations can be maybe more robust and a little more informed if you have some background and see some of the direction that we're heading. Pete, if you can go off of sharing screen, sure. I'm just going to put up a couple of last slides to talk about process and where we're going next here. So this has been again, good opportunity for some background. We now want to give you an opportunity in really an accessible way to get more information on some of the key topics that we're talking about. And to do that, we're going to go into some breakout rooms. So this is an opportunity, again, to have a smaller group discussion, get into some more detail with subject matter experts. I saw a question in chat about 146 South. That transportation room will be a great place to ask that. We'll have just about 45 minutes or so for these conversations. There are 3 rooms in 3 topics: transportation, land use and open space, environment, and sustainability. And nobody should feel like you have to decide on just one room and stay there. You'll be able to move at your will and pace to any of those breakout rooms. I think we're all anxious to be able to get back together and do these things in person, but under the circumstances, this is the next best thing. I'll also remind you that we've got Spanish translation of all of what's happened to this point. And if you go into the interpretation icon at the bottom right of the screen, that'll take you to that Spanish translation. So just in terms of visuals, if you look on your screen in the bottom right corner, there are those 4 boxes for breakout rooms. If you hit that, you'll be able to take that into one of those breakouts. I'll also mention that Pete and I will be staying in this main room. We don't have any particular issue to discuss. We can provide some more information or have discussions on general matters that might be of interest to you. That's also where the live stream is going to be. So with that, I would invite everybody to go find the breakout room area. Go to any of those breakout rooms you want. Feel free to move around, and let's have some robust conversations.
Alan, I don't see the breakout room at the bottom.
Yeah, I don't either.
Okay.
Sometimes it's an issue with the width of your screen. Zoom has an option there on the bottom where there's like 3 dots for more options. You click on those 3 dots on the lower right-hand side of your screen, you should be able to see that breakout room icon.
I just clicked on that and it doesn't bring up the breakout rooms.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
All right, we'll work on that. We'll work on the technology and see if we can find that, because I'm not seeing it either. But in the meantime, as we're trying to get those up, we can engage, I guess, here in a little bigger group, but start with some questions or comments if you have them. I'd suggest that you use the raise hand function at the bottom. That'll allow us to kind of call on people.
So Alan, maybe while we're doing that, there were a couple of chats that we could address. One was, how long will the project take?
It's a good question. So let's start from where we can access the site and start the work. And as I said, the plan is that the inmates might be moved to the new correctional facility a little over a year from now. And at that point, we'll be able to go in and prepare the site. Development of this kind depends largely on the market and what the demand is. And so it's hard to put a particular time frame on, but I'd say that we're probably looking at a 15 to 20 year build out over time. Part of the reality is that sites like this are never done. So once you kind of get the first round through and they age, there are opportunities for us to, as the land values change, to increase density and opportunities. All right, Reed, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Alan. You've given me, and I appreciate it, ample opportunity to comment on the open space system, on the road network and so on. So I won't repeat any of the comments I've made before, but you did in fact invite a comment on the BRT system. And I am wondering, and it just occurred to me, why there isn't a third station. I know the idea of BRT is to get you from one place to fast. And when you add stations, you add stops and you add delay. But, you know, if you think of BRT as rubber tired LRT, and you think of our LRT system, for example, on 400 South, we do have fairly close spacing of stations. And I was thinking that would almost be transformational for the northwest portion of the plan if you had a one more BRT station kind of at the edge of the core area. And I'm wondering if that's a possibility, if that's something you thought of and rejected, or it's something that's being imposed on you, having only two stations.
Well, it's a great comment, Reed, and I will say we've really valued the conversations we've had with you, and a number of the ideas that you've shared are going to be incorporated into the next round. I have wondered about a third site. As you know, this is not our system. It's a regional system. And so it's designed, as you acknowledge, to get people through fairly quickly so that we can have good ridership. So those are the kinds of discussions that I think we have to have with the transit agency. But at this point, two is what they think is appropriate at our site. So we're trying to take best advantage of the opportunities that have been presented.
So, and I understand that, and it's not your decision, but I again, I'm thinking of it in terms of costs and benefits, and I'd like to see that explored with UTA, and I think they might be more receptive than you might think at first, since they have already kind of identified the BRT stations. But one more in this multimodal development would kind of balance it out a bit more, make transit more competitive.
Yeah, thanks, Reed. And we certainly understand the value of those TODs. And in fact, one of the reasons to go to BRT instead of light rail is because it allowed additional stations at the site, which add value to the development around it. So I think it's a really good point. We do have the breakout room option that's available now. I invite you to go there. But to finish up this issue, I see Patty Garber, you got your hand raised. She's with UTA and maybe can answer that question a little more directly. But you're welcome to stick around and listen to that, or start heading to those breakout rooms using the 4 boxes at the bottom right of the screen. So Patty, do you have a specific response?
Yeah, well, I'll answer here and then I'll go to the breakout room. But, you know, I mean, we haven't even thought about that. I am not going to rule it out. So like you said, Alan, we, you know, with rail, well, originally we were just looking at one station, and with BRT, we were able to put another station. So I think that is an interesting idea and something that we could look at. So I'm not going to rule it out.
Thank you.
That's encouraging. Thank you, Patty. Appreciate that.
And now we go to breakout rooms?
Yes, we go to the breakout rooms and get into some more details with the subject matter experts. And would invite you to do that. Again, you can see that icon on the bottom right of the screen with the 4 boxes, and that'll take you there.
Alan,
Steve Burton had a comment he wanted to make, and so Steve would welcome that.
Well, thanks. I spoke with Representative Snow, and he said this might be an opportunity to share my thoughts that I shared with him. I'm a local attorney in Salt Lake City. A few years ago, they built a new federal courthouse. And for those of you who have seen the new federal courthouse in Salt Lake City, it's a big, gigantic square. And 95% of the friends and attorneys that I talk with say, oh, great, they had an opportunity to create a wonderful federal courthouse, and they made a Borg cube. And every time I look at that, and for the rest of my life, I'll look at that and think that was just a huge missed opportunity. And I think the sentiment is similar. And it's a beautiful, the interior is beautiful. It's well made, I'm sure. But the only thought that I have when I see it is missed opportunity. And I guess my thought is that when people have asked me, what do I see while I'm in Salt Lake? I've often said, well, you should go up the canyons. You should maybe check out Temple Square. They can't go into the temple, of course. And but we're missing kind of a really worldwide recognizable icon or landmark. I mean, I served my LDS mission in Italy, and there's just things when you go there, you can't miss them. And everybody wants to be there in person and take a picture of them and show all their friends and family when they get home. And I feel like if we're talking about a generational opportunity here, something that is once in a lifetime and unique in the world, this is maybe the only time that any of us living here get an opportunity to be a part of something like that. And I just think if this is that opportunity, and our children and our children's children will see this space driving between Salt Lake and Utah County and from north to south or south to north, or all the travelers that come through Salt Lake City, this is the opportunity to make something that is potentially known worldwide, that's an artistic symbol, architectural symbol, something that's truly only done once in a lifetime. And I think all of the ideas that have been presented are fascinating and interesting, but I don't want to drive past the point of the mountain, and every single time I drive past and I look at this project, I think, that was a missed opportunity. So that's my thought, and I hope we can seize the opportunity that's been presented to us.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. And I'd just say I absolutely agree. That's been one of the things that we've been talking about from the beginning, that the site can't be just a great development, but ideally it'd be an icon, a place where people from around the world would come and visit, that it'd be on Instagram shots, etc. And I know when we did our kickoff press event, then Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox, who was co-chair of our board, said he'd love to see our version of the Eiffel Tower on the site or something along those lines. So yeah, very much in mind. Love the idea. And then I think it raises the next question. What should it be? What does it look like? But you think of, in Chicago, people go to the park and see the bean, and you go to New York at Hudson Yards and see the vessel, and other things like that. So having something distinctive, iconic here, I think makes a lot of sense. So it's a matter of figuring out what is it, how do you pay for it, who pays for it, all of those kinds of things. But those are all just details. The vision, I think, is consistent.
Yeah, and Steve, I think you also left a note on Facebook. I saw a comment on Facebook, I think last Thursday or Friday. Maybe you had left that as well. Somebody made the same point. I would agree with Alan. I think this is an incredible opportunity for something like that. And since I saw your post on Facebook, I've been thinking a lot about it. So I'm glad you asked again today. And when you think about some of those iconic structures, the Eiffel Tower, the Space Needle in Seattle. Both of those were built for World Expositions, and they had no real purpose other than to be a symbol. And yet they've become these enduring icons of these cities. So I think not only is this an appropriate place to do that, but I think in terms of the geography of the site as well, sort of halfway between Salt Lake and Provo, to have, and with the way the land pushes out at this particular spot, it's also, I think, topographically a really interesting spot to have something significant. And I don't know if you know SOM's work, but we love to do tall things. We did the Burj Khalifa building in Dubai.
Okay, it doesn't have to be tall. That's the great idea.
It doesn't have to be tall, but if you wanted it tall, we can help you with that.
I love it. Thanks. Yeah, one of the things that we talk about in our planning meetings and board meetings is ensuring there's a wow factor, and this is part of it. Of course, that means different things to different people, but thank you, Steve. Appreciate you bringing that forward.
I appreciate the time very much. Thank you.
You bet. And again, would encourage anybody who's interested to go to one of those breakout rooms where we can get some more detail on land use, transportation, sustainability, and environment, and those pieces. Having said that, anybody else on this in this room who has a question or a comment they'd like to share?
Several comments made in the chat earlier in Pete's presentation. Some of those folks are still here in the main room. Perhaps we could ask their questions. Let me just pull them up.
Joshua Lyman asked a question about connecting Central Park to the River to Range Park. Maybe we could kind of talk about that. I've actually got some supporting graphics, Muriel, if we want to share those.
That'd be great. And just to cue things up, we also had Danielle Prego ask about, density next to 146 South. What are plans for 146 South to support density, that we're planning for on the site?
Great, and so that could probably best be answered and addressed in the transportation room, but we'll try at a higher level.
So a key part of the master plan, of course, is the core area. This is the most mixed use zone. It's in the center of the project. It has a significant amount of retail. It's where the Central Park is located and the River to Range Park comes through. So we have looked at a variety of models for this, in terms of density, in terms of land use. This is one in Arizona that seems to be of a similar scale. We'd want to really customize this to be unique to Salt Lake and Utah. So we've actually looked at three options within the three options. So three different density levels for this core area. So this is the first one. And in this option, you can see that the Central Park is actually separated a little bit from the River to Range Park. And the BRT would actually run along the eastern edge of the core area. And then along the northern edge, the pink dots represent the stations. So I'd love to hear some thoughts on this. In the next drawing here, you can see a three-dimensional version of this. So this gives you a better sense of scale. So the buildings, you can see the tall buildings there in the foreground are actually 12-story buildings, so fairly tall. And you can see that relationship between the Central Park and the River to Range Park. We have started to think a little bit about programming the Central Park, what actually happens in here. So you can see some of the activities that we're thinking of, dining, maybe some special gardens, some play areas, splash pad. But predominantly the Central Park would be used as an event space, maybe where we have 4th of July celebrations or other significant events. The second option is the most dense, and also in this option, we've moved the Central Park south and actually links up to the River to Range Park. So it becomes a larger open space. The BRT runs next to the Central Park, but not through it, and then turns along the north edge and exits the site. So the BRT becomes a design factor in the thinking of this area. So that's option 2. You can see here it's a little more dense, so you see a few more taller buildings around that Central Park. And then the third one is the, so here's alternate 3. So you can see the level of density here. This is the Woodlands Town Center in Texas. But the types of density and activities that we imagine going on in this space. The third one, the Central Park is somewhat attached to the River to Range Park, but it's also a little bit separate. And in this design option, the BRT route actually goes right through the core area, through the middle of the core area. So you'd actually have to cross that BRT route to get from the retail zone, which is shown here in the red, over to the Central Park. This is the most efficient in terms of how the BRT moves through this area, but does have some implications in terms of the Central Park. So be happy to take any questions or ideas on that.
I might just say, and while you're thinking about some comments, as part of that question, I think there was an element in there about, whether we could mix or match a little bit among these.
Yeah,
we're calling them alternatives. I think the better word is concepts. And no, we don't have to pick one of the 3 and stick with it. One of the things we're doing is evaluating how these different concepts perform and help us achieve our ultimate goals. So we'll likely be taking some of the best elements from any of the 3 and combining them as we head toward our final plan. Thanks. The next question that came up, as we heard, was a question about 146 South. And that road system, I would guess that part of the concern underlying that question is traffic and what can be done. Maybe I'll give a general answer and then turn it to Pete and let him fill in some detail. But we recognize that traffic and mobility are really a key element of this area. It's an area of concern, and we need to make sure that we're doing our part to minimize the negative and emphasize the positive. With respect to 146 South specifically, there are detailed discussions going on with Bluffdale City, with UDOT, and our folks, trying to find the best alignment, the best streetscape, the best system to move traffic, because of course that interchange will probably be desirable. But I'd say beyond that, there are a number of strategies we're trying to incorporate here to minimize impacts on the transportation system. And one is to create additional areas of access. So putting some roads under or over the freeways. Also, you heard the circulator, the transit system. These are all ways to reduce the number of vehicles coming into and leaving the site. We're also looking at kind of what we're calling a one-car concept, where by initiating a number of strategies, including transit, interesting parking solutions, the internal circulator, some car sharing, some on-demand stuff, all of those things, we maybe reduce the need for a family to have a second car. They'll need one to go off-site. They may need one for the weekends, but for the day-to-day living, maybe not. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for folks to get around the site. There are also some elements of this plan, including the balance of jobs and housing. That's really designed to provide an opportunity for people to work and live on the site and not have to commute off the site. So combining all of those things, we think that we can demonstrate technologies and approaches that improve the functioning and efficiency of our transportation system. I don't know, Pete, anything you'd add to that?
I think you captured it pretty well, Alan. I would also say that we're talking to landowners along 146 South to identify alternate access points into the project. So we anticipate that there will be potentially one, certainly, if not two, or possibly even three other access points down to 146. So part of the effort is really to reconnect and extend the grid of streets, so there's not so much pressure on any one street. So people have multiple options for how to move through. But I do believe that the state or the city is planning on upgrades to 146, just as a matter of course, as a matter of just routine road upgrades in the area. And then finally, a lot of the traffic on 146 will actually be coming from west of us. Because we're so close to the highway, most of the traffic on 146 actually will be coming from the west. So our project isn't going to dramatically impact 146 to the west of our site.
Okay. Thanks, Pete.
And I think, Al, one last thing is I believe I heard they're going to rebuild that underpass under the railroad tracks where it goes under the front rudder line at some point in the near future. Right. So that little bottleneck will be straightened out.
That's well under discussion at this point. Yeah. Thanks. And I know, Pete, you presented some images of that core area. Curious if anybody had comments on it, things you liked, things you didn't like, suggestions for improvement.
We did get a question from Karen Thomas. She asks, what are the natural hazards in this area? Is it in a liquefaction zone? Does it have the high water table issue that was found when the Hale Center Theater in Sandy was built?
Yeah, we've certainly looked at those issues. There is a higher water table to the western portion of the site. And so that's something that we take into account. We have looked at the earthquake maps and everything else, and it's subject to the issues that most properties are in the area, but not more so. And there's been, of course, we've got some lessons to be learned from the facility that's been there for the last 70 years. And so far, the engineers have not found anything that they consider to be a particular concern at the site. But it is something that we are very much aware of, continue to study, continue to look at. And the reality is that to the extent in certain spots we find issues, there are ways to address those through engineering. But fortunately, to this point, nobody's raised any red flags or fatal flaws. Thanks. If we don't have other questions, Pete, I know that you had a few concepts that you wanted to dive into in more detail. And if you've got another one or two of those, we can jump in and see if there are further comments or questions.
Yeah, let me pull up a little just to share with, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, Pete. Sean Benjamin asks, with the TSD, TOD zoning, it is usually unlimited height and density. Why limit it to 10 stories?
Maybe I can start and then Pete, you can fill in. We're not limiting anything. If we were just going to say, what would we most like to see at the site? We'd love to see something higher. To the extent that there's a limiting factor, it's the market. And right now you look at what rents could be commanded in the area and what types of buildings could be constructed economically under those circumstances. So as we plan initially, we've got to think about what can economically be developed here, but recognize that we've got an opportunity to move the market a little bit. And if this site turns out to be as dynamic and interesting and appealing as we think it will, then land values are going to go up, and those land values would support higher buildings and greater density. So not a function of regulation, but a function of the market and the economics right now.
Yeah, that's right, Alan. And I would agree. We're not artificially putting a cap on density or height. As Alan mentioned, it's really a function of what the market will bear. And we're hoping as the plan matures and advances that interest in creating more innovative approaches to both density and land use will start to happen. One of the approaches, or the approach that we're taking right now with our grid and a fairly regularized development strategy in terms of development parcels, is that it accommodates future change. So as we move forward in, say, 5 years, if land uses change or the project wants to densify or any other variables come into play, market-driven or design-driven, that the plan can accommodate those. So there is a lot of flexibility built in to the plan for exactly that reason. I just wanted to maybe touch on this, what we're calling the Wasatch District. So I think, as maybe everyone remembers from the presentation, we do have a district identity in the works for different parts of the plan. The purpose is not to isolate a district or to limit how it could be developed, but actually simply provide an identity to it so that people or like-minded developers or people that have shared business missions or innovation missions may want to come together in certain districts. So the Wasatch District is an important district because it's the easternmost. It has an office orientation, an office mission. It would also act as a buffer to the central part of the project, the residential portion, so they're not abutting the highway. The architectural identity, we're still in process, but we want to have it have a very Utah-specific response, maybe a climate-driven response, a highly sustainable building type. We included this image because this is approximately the height of the buildings that we're talking about. This is what the market will bear today, buildings in the range of 6 stories. But I think what's important about this project in particular is the way that the ground plane is treated. So you can see these passageways between buildings. So even though it's an office environment and we're going to have retail supporting uses and maybe some residential mixed in, we still want the office environment to be as rich and accessible and pleasant as possible. This is another more academically driven research building, again, 5 stories in height. So this gives you a sense of that, the building height and type that we would be seeing in this office driven district. Again, a focus on connection to the outdoors, the adjacency to open space, what we call an active ground level. So the ground level has lobbies, classrooms, maybe retail opportunities, things like that. Here's another example of that type of active ground floor. So again, very porous ground floor. And by porous, we mean that people can move in and under the building if they need to. And when you take those building types with the current parking requirements in an office environment, we do begin to get a layout that might look like something like this. So again, this is the northeast corner of the project adjacent to I-15, which you can see on the right. And this is not by any means meant to be a final plan. It's really what we call a test fit. So it's just trying to understand if the buildings that are currently being built or asked for by different office and institutional users will actually fit into the master plan. So we did determine that they do fit. And I do want to just highlight a few features. So you can see that green edge, which would act as a buffer to I-15, but also a recreational amenity. You can see a central park here. So the office district might have a central open space. We called it Wasatch Park. There may be a retail element around that park, restaurants, things like that, that would serve all of the office workers in the area. And then you can also see that we've organized the office buildings into groups. So you can see a sort of a campus environment up here to the north, maybe two smaller campus ideas in the middle, and then two or three more at the south. Off to the left here, you can see that central zone, the mixed use hub that we just looked at. So you can see how those are related. And in 3 dimensions, you can then see in this drawing approximately how much, how tall those buildings will be. So again, these are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 6 stories in height. The P represents the parking structures. So what we want to try and do is screen those parking structures from view from the public spaces or the major roads. From the freeway, we can screen them with vegetation, with trees. So when you drive or walk through the district, you actually are mostly seeing the fronts of buildings, lobby spaces, those active ground floors that I talked about. So again, this is a test fit. Here you see the whole district and how that would begin to work. And we can further screen the parking, and we can also treat it architecturally so it's not so visible from the street. The other attribute of this layout is that you can begin to combine parcels into larger campuses. So we've shown in the red text here how you could combine 3 or 4 parcels together to create a campus. So let's say you get a big user that wants to build here, some larger company that wants to take 4 or 5 or even 6 parcels. They can do that. They can build about 1 million square feet of office, but the plan still retains its essential character and design goals. We've also shown the BRT station here in the lower left, and you can see that most of this office would be within a 10-minute walk of that BRT station. So that's great. One of the purposes of BRT, of course, is to get office workers here from up and down the valley. So they might take front runner to the Draper station, transfer to the BRT, and within 5 minutes, they can be in their office building. So that gives you a sense of these test fits that we're doing now. So the good news is that the plan does accommodate current office needs and what the market is asking for in terms of office. So happy to take any questions or comments on that.
Thank you, Pete. That's helpful, and it's this is a level of detail that nobody's seen before. in our planning as we start getting down into some of these districts and what they might look like from the street.
Yeah.
Of course, there's plenty of work to be done, but you're getting the first view. Any thoughts, comments on that? Okay, any other general topics that you'd like us to try to weigh in on a little bit?
Aaron Thomas does ask what the general coordinates are for the point.
By general coordinates, I mean location. So if that's the question, it's kind of between Bangor Highway on the north, 146 south on the south, I-15 on the east, and over to the front runner line on the west. It's 600 acres is configured in a way that really is almost a square mile across each way. And so that creates some opportunities for us to build this 15-minute city or community that we've talked about, where somebody could access any parts of the community within about a 15-minute walk from the hub. And so that's really an opportunity to do something for the first time in Utah. And we're encouraged by that. I think one other thing I'd say is talk a little bit about how this fits within the broader region. So we know it's near the boundary of Utah County and Salt Lake County, two of the fastest growing metropolitan regions in the country. And you know, there's been a lot of activity in northern Utah County around Lehigh relative to high tech and building out Silicon Slopes. Within this area, there's about 20,000 acres of undeveloped property. Some of that's the gravel pits in the area. Some are just areas that haven't been developed yet. So there's a real question there, and I think a real opportunity. The way we develop those 20,000 acres is going to have a lot to do with the quality of our community going forward and the kind of lifestyle we live. If we just kind of do business as usual and first come, first serve, we're going to get a different outcome than if we think about it with some care and coordinate with one another and find opportunities for efficiencies and synergies. And I think doing that, and that's the direction that we're heading, that's the direction that our state leadership is encouraging. I think we can create real opportunities for the landowners in the area and for the residents, both current and future. That's going to be an important piece for us.
Steve Burton asks a follow-up to his earlier question. He says, thank you for thinking about a significant landmark. Public competitions have been used in the past to produce important public landmarks. The World Trade Center, the Duomo in Florence, and other landmarks are examples. Is this something that could be considered?
Yes, it can. In fact, it's an idea that has been floated. And I think sometimes there are different ways of structuring those, but I think a lot of people have interesting ideas, and we would be the first to say we have no monopoly on good ideas, and this project's going to be better if we harness the collective wisdom and creativity of our community and beyond. So, yeah, I think you're right, Steve. That's something that's been done in many places, and it is certainly on the table.
He specifically asks, is there like a working group of artists, architects, and historians?
No, not specifically on that. We do have groups and representatives of each of those areas that are working as part of our stakeholder advisory committee and on our working groups, but don't have one specifically dedicated to those issues. Those are issues that are going to become much more important as we get to next steps. And as we said, this is kind of a framework plan, so it's not identifying details of architecture and design. It's kind of outlining uses and where they go. once we get to a point of being ready to do some vertical development, we expect that the developers are going to be doing much more detailed planning that will get down into the architectural realm. There'll have to be design standards that are created for the area, and an architectural review as well as plan review before projects are approved. So all of that will necessarily be part of the mix. It's a great question. Yeah.
We are closing down the breakout rooms. We've just sent the 1-minute warning and people are starting to trickle back in.
Okay. So last chance. Any final questions or thoughts? Okay. Well, thanks to all of you. We appreciate you participating and your great questions and ideas. We'll give everybody a chance to regather here, and then we'll do a little download. Okay, Muriel, do you think we've got most reconvened here, or there's still a few that we're waiting on? Can you tell?
We should be back in by now.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. The few, the proud, the brave, those with ingenuity that found their way through the system and made it back. We appreciate it. Hope those discussions were useful to you, informative. I have no question that they're valuable to us. They help us think about things in new ways and explore new ideas to really make this a place that can be recognized around the world and really loved by the people here in the state. So in the time that we have remaining, we want to hear a little bit about the discussions in each of those breakout rooms. We, of course, recorded them. We've taken notes. We'll make them part of our permanent record, but we want everybody to be able to benefit from hearing all the ideas. So I'm going to call on representatives, some of the facilitators from each of those groups, to give us a highlight of some of the things that they heard. So let's start with the land use group. Would you, who's gonna present on behalf of that group?
I can start, and Aaron and Jason, feel free to jump in. We had a great discussion, and a lot of people had very interesting questions. We started off with talking about mixed use and whether there should be a mix of office and residential within each district to support this idea of creating vibrancy in each district. There was, of course, questions about affordable housing opportunities and different types of housing, how we're accommodating those. A very strong interest in schools and daycare to support the population that's going to be there. We also had a discussion around open space as well in the second half. A strong opinion about really preserving and respecting the natural landscape that is there when we're starting to think about more detailed designs for the River to Range Park and other open spaces around the site. We also did ask people in the breakout room whether they like the Central Park and River to Range Park to be combined or separated, as we've shown in the alternatives. And their opinions for both. Some people like the idea of blending it together, which makes it look larger. Other people did like having the separation so that the Central Parks could have buildings around it and really activate that space. And also someone pointed out that the users of those two parks may be very different. So it may be a good idea to have them separated as well. And we also had some questions or items pointed out to us that we'll be discussing as a team in the next stages, for example, about phasing, where the project will begin, and how will the ongoing operation and maintenance be handled in the open spaces, and then also about perhaps having art requirements for buildings.
That's great. A number of really important issues, and we've recognized the need to probably mix the uses a little bit more to make sure that all places are vibrant in the evenings and weekends. Number of good ideas on the park. Love that. Yeah, we've tried to incorporate natural areas in here. So these are, housing's a big deal. We've had specific conversations with our board about housing accessibility and affordability and strategies that may be available for us to ensure that this really is a community, that all are welcome, that people who work here have a place to live here, and that it really has that sense of community where people from different backgrounds, ages, incomes, et cetera, can interact as part of a greater whole. And so those are all wonderful comments. Anything else from that group? Other facilitators that you want to add? Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks, Saki, for summarizing that. And it's good to have some specific ideas that we can carry forward into that next round of the planning. All right, let's turn to our transportation group. Hear what you had to say.
Okay, great. Yeah. Mark and I had a great group. We had some good discussion. We were able to share some slides about potential cross-sectional elements of the streets in the project. So that we had some good discussion around that. A lot of the discussion, we had people that commented,
Maybe it's just me, but.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah,
okay.
I can hear you okay.
Okay, great. So safety is key. We want to make sure pedestrians and all modes are safe as we design these roads. There were comments about making sure that there was connectivity with the regional network for pedestrian connections, roadway connections. There were thoughts about alternate bike path or lane scenarios where maybe we consider two-way bike paths on each side of the road. Comments about making sure we plan for all types of pedestrians and bicyclists. So for the individual that's commuting, maybe also for a family that's biking together, we want to make sure we provide adequate space for them to do that. There were discussions about road diets instead of thinking about typical cross sections that we see in other communities. Questions about and comments about phasing of the project. They want to make sure that we get the framework in place. There were comments about other communities maybe that didn't plan out the framework of the roadways right away. Maybe they didn't build them soon enough. They want to make sure we get that framework in place so that as the land uses come in, it can be successful. Let's see here. There were a lot of great discussions about transit and travel time. There were some thoughts about potential businesses that would come to the point and wanting to hire people from different communities, wanting to make sure that they have good transit access to the site. Questions about travel time from, say, Sugar House to the point. How fast can people get here? Is it a good option for them? There were thoughts about the front runner station, where it is in Draper, where there could be opportunity for another one. So there were thoughts about that. Overall, some pretty positive feedback on cross sections. And some good things to take back to improve. So.
Thanks, Josh.
was gonna.
Great, thank you. Again, a number of really robust ideas. And I turned off my video because number one, it's a public service to all of you. And number two, I'm getting messages that my computer and link is unstable. So I don't know if you can hear me, but really good ideas. Transportation land use connection is going to be vital. One of the things we recognize is that even though we've divided into different breakout groups, all of these things are interrelated, and we have to be thinking carefully about how we make it work together. And transportation strategies help land use and environment and vice versa.
Yeah,
Thank
Ellen.
you. All right, well, let's
Ellen?
turn to our last group, looking at sustainability. And so sustainability and the environment. Who's leading that?
Hi, everyone. This is Arti Gavin. And I was joined by Justin Lim. Both of us are with SOM. Again, a great discussion, small group joined in, and we talked about the key areas of performance around the project. And I think it was interesting what the room was responding to first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. We have 5 areas of performance we're looking at. And I think quickly what we heard today was nuanced and slightly different than what we heard in the first 2 community meetings. But as Pete had mentioned in the beginning, very strong positive reaction to us focusing on the water. And then also the idea of air quality. And so I think some of that came out of what Josh talked about in the transportation conversation, but this idea of reducing transportation emissions by 50% resonated well, and the connection to air quality. Again, a lot of support for the idea of a very robust open space program with 40% of the land area devoted to open space, ultimately trying to avoid habitat fragmentation and to have some bio islands for habitat to thrive even as we develop. There was also continued interest in this idea of net zero and electrification. Again, a longstanding interest and goal of the project, also supported today in the conversation. And the last area of discussion, waste. So I think an acknowledgement from all of us that we do have a ways to go on that, and we are looking for innovation in that area. Still, there is some strong commitment from the project in terms of how we can reduce both construction waste and try to support positive behavior change for residents once the project is built. And the final point of conversation, maybe the last 10 minutes, was around innovation and how the master plan and sustainability can support that. And again, it really came back to not just the metrics of sustainability, but really how we develop the project that has walkability, pedestrian friendly, really live work. And by designing well with an open park system, we will be able to support or have supportive infrastructure that can meet all of these aspirations. So I think that was a very nice ending to the conversation, that the design of the place making, will then really help us result in some of the high aspirations we have in terms of performance. And Justin, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else.
No, I think you covered all the things that we've talked about. Great conversation.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry, I've still got some instability in my connection, but see if it'll hang on long enough to wrap up. Wonderful input. This is so valuable to us. And, it'll be shocking to you to hear that not everybody views this opportunity in the same way. And there are a number of different ideas, a number of different priorities. We're not going to be able to be all things to all people, but with the kind of thoughtful and constructive input we've received today, we really believe that we can do something that will create benefits for the long term. And it's just a better project every time we reach out to you and the public. And and get your input. So in terms of next steps, we'll take the information that you've provided, continue this next stage of our planning, and start to refine the ideas that we've generated, get into more detail on our sustainability plan, the transportation system, the land use, and how these pieces fit together to optimize the opportunity that we have. I like that we've heard a lot of big ideas today, and that there's an appetite for doing something that is really iconic and special in the area. This is Utah, and this is our project, so it ought to be that way. And I'll just tell you, as soon as I wrap up here, I'm going to go in and see my grandson who's visiting me right now. He's about 20 months old. He lives in Bluffdale now, a little ways away from the site. And I, especially because of him, feel a responsibility to make sure that we do this right and think about not just him, but all those who live there now and will in the future. We've got a responsibility that weighs heavy on us to make sure that we are creating a place that solves problems and that keeps our focus on the horizon in the future, not looking back. Thanks for helping us do that. We appreciate it. More to come. And again, you can follow what we're doing on our website, www.thepointutah.org, on our social media platforms, YouTube channel, etc. We welcome it. So take care, everybody. Again, many thanks. We'll see you.
Thank you.